Muito boa tarde, muito obrigada por terem vindo. Sejam bem-vindos à edição 2017 deste Festival Internacional de Cultura. E permitam-me dizer isto já no início desta sessão, acho que não poderíamos começar da melhor maneira. Não havia melhor maneira para começar este festival do que convidar Arundhati Roy para estar connosco aqui hoje. Aquilo que vimos foi uma pequena ilustração do universo que Arundhati Roy convocou para este seu segundo livro, O Ministério da Felicidade Suprema, um livro escrito 20 anos depois de O Deus das Pequenas Coisas. Um livro que a deu a conhecer ao mundo, fez vencer um dos mais importantes prémios literários, o Booker Prize. Este prémio tão importante, foi a primeira indiana a receber este prémio e por isso mesmo foi idolatrada quase como uma heroína nacional. Mas Arundhati Roy decidiu que este prémio não a iria calar, não a iria reprimir e que por isso mesmo iria utilizar os microfones e o poder da palavra para poder exprimir a sua opinião e, no fundo, para dar voz aos oprimidos, aos desfavorecidos. Bem, mas sobre isto vamos ter a oportunidade de falar nesta sessão. Arundhati Roy, ainda antes da nossa conversa, gostava de nos presentear com mais uma pequena leitura deste livro fabuloso, deixem-me já dizer, O Ministério da Felicidade Suprema.
Thank you, everybody, for. Sorry. Thank you. Is that on?
Here, you have to press here.
Here?
Yes.
Now, can you hear me? Yeah. I should know this by now, but thank you all. It's a great pleasure to see you and to be here. Friends of mine made this little film because this book, it traverses through so many universes that, you know, whichever part I read, you don't really get a sense of the other part. So I'm going to just read like for 5 minutes and then we'll have a conversation. This is just a paragraph that appears in the book right at the beginning, before the story begins. At magic hour, when the sun has gone but the light has not, armies of flying foxes unhinge themselves from the banyan trees in the old graveyard and drift across the city like smoke. When the bats leave, the crows come home. Not all the din of their homecoming fills the silence left by the sparrows that have gone missing, and the old white-backed vultures, custodians of the dead for more than 100 million years that have been wiped out. The vultures died of diclofenac poisoning. Diclofenac, cow aspirin, given to cattle as a muscle relaxant to ease pain and increase the production of milk, worked like nerve gas on white-backed vultures. Each chemically relaxed, milk-producing cow or buffalo that died became poisoned vulture bait. As cattle turned into better dairy machines, as the city ate more ice cream, butterscotch crunch, nutty buddy and chocolate chip, as it drank more mango milkshake, vultures' necks began to droop as though they were tired and simply couldn't stay awake. Silver beards of saliva dripped from their beaks, and one by one they tumbled off their branches, dead. Not many noticed the passing of the friendly old birds. There was so much else to look forward to.
É o início deste livro, O Ministério da Felicidade Suprema. Tanto do meu estado me acho incerto, que em vivo ardor tremendo estou de frio. Sem causa, juntamente choro e rio. O mundo todo abarco e nada aperto. É este excerto deste soneto de Camões que irá dar o mote à nossa conversa, uma conversa que tem um tema mais lato, felicidade, fronteiras. Bem, Arundhati Roy, e como a felicidade às vezes pode surgir nos lugares e nos momentos mais inesperados, tal como acontece neste livro.
Well, happiness is not an institution, and I imagine that the most profound question that is facing the human race today is, has what we call progress and civilization, is it addressing human happiness, or do we need to redefine what we mean by happiness? In the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, of course, it begins in a graveyard, and much of the story is about a community of people who have brought little shattered pieces of their broken hearts to the graveyard, which eventually becomes a place of life and not death, where a little guest house comes up, where there's a grave in every room. And yet, somehow, they manage to blur the borders between life and death, between all kinds of borders, in fact, and manage to live in a place where the battered angels hold open the doors illegally, a crack, and the dead and the living mingle like guests at a cocktail party, And that is one part of the book, and the other, as you saw in the film, is set in Kashmir, which is in the graveyard I just spoke about, which is in Delhi. The guest house is called the Jannat guest house. Jannat in Urdu means paradise. And in Kashmir, which is often referred to as Jannat, has been historically referred to as Jannat, means paradise, because it's such a beautiful place. You have it covered with graveyards now because of the war that's been going on there for so many years. So you have, in the one case, a paradise guest house that comes up on a graveyard, and in another place, which was called Paradise, you have it covered with graves. But always humor, generosity, hope, and happiness appear in the strangest and most unexpected places, among the most broken of people. And love to...
É preciso viver a infelicidade. É preciso viver a infelicidade para se reconhecer a felicidade, Arundhati Roy.
Sorry, happiness. Well, I suppose, I don't suppose that there is any single human soul that has been, permanently happy. So, to be able to recognize what it is that gives you joy, I would say, is a very supreme human talent. And to recognize the fact that it is an ephemeral thing. It's not something that you can hold on to. It's not something that you can institutionalize. But certainly, like I said, it's a very fragile thing, and you have to believe that it appears at the most unexpected times. And yet, I think we live in societies which are actually now marketing happiness as a product, And this novel, it's not about any one thing, but surely, the characters in it know that it isn't something that you can consume or sell.
No início deste livro, Arundhati Roy cita poeta turco, Nazim Hikmet, espero estar a pronunciar de forma correta, e a citação diz o seguinte: quer dizer, tudo depende do coração. E já no Deus das Pequenas Coisas o coração estava bastante presente. Acredita nisso, Arundhati Roy? Tudo depende do coração?
Well, I think that eventually we do know that however much we look at statistics and analysis and figures and facts and rationalizations, eventually decisions are made, big as well as small, good as well as bad, based upon feelings, So the heart is also a strange place, right? I mean, racism, nationalism, chauvinism, just as love of all kinds do originate in that irrational space called the heart, however much we try to pretend that we are cold and rational societies, The God of Small Things is a book which is about a family at whose center is a broken heart. The Ministry of Utmost Happiness sort of turns that inside out, and it's about it's a shattered story. It's a story which tries to grapple with a much more complex reality, that we all live in now. A reality where there is no solitude, because we all have our cell phones and our internet and are bombarded with information. Cities where we have to deal with it's much of it is set in the city of Delhi, and to deal with crowds and things we don't understand all the time, and yet the characters in this book are the unconsoled, people who somehow don't fit into that grid which Indian society is meant to live in. Everyone thinks that India is a place of chaos and anarchy. That's only the traffic and so on. Actually, it's a society that lives in an iron grid of caste and ethnicity and all of that. And so these are people who carry around little shards of broken hearts, and they bring them together to make a mended heart in the graveyard, which is now, given the rise of the Hindu right and Hindu nationalism, really graveyards only exist in India for Muslims and Christians, because Hindus cremate their dead. So graveyards are ghettos, and often people say to me, "Oh, your book is magic realism, and you have these people who live in graveyards." I said, "No, it's not magic realism; it's realism." People do live in graveyards, and it's very much part of the landscape. So the heart is very present in both books, but in different ways.
A primeira personagem que nós conhecemos quando começamos a ler este livro é uma Ihra, não sei se estou a pronunciar bem a palavra, que é uma...
Hijra. You pronounce it Hijra.
Hijra. Que é uma entidade, uma espécie de semideus que todos nós, ou pelo menos os indianos, gostam de ter por perto, porque dá sorte, mas ao mesmo tempo são entidades, são pessoas a quem dão dinheiro para se afastarem. É uma espécie de paradoxo, tanto dão sorte como também não as queremos por perto. E a primeira personagem deste livro é então Anjum, que na verdade é hermafrodita, portanto vive aqui no fundo vive numa espécie de limbo, não tem um lugar propriamente na sociedade, apesar de ser entendida como uma espécie de semideus, ao mesmo tempo vive no submundo. Muitas destas pessoas dedicam-se, por exemplo, à prostituição. É para dar voz a estas pessoas que, na verdade, não têm propriamente um lugar na sociedade, que escreve Arundhati Roy.
No, I don't actually believe in writing on behalf of people or being, this very commonly used term of the voice of the voiceless. Because I don't believe, as I've said very often, that there is no such thing as the voiceless. There are only those who are deliberately unheard, And Anjum is not a, it's not a sociology of the Hijra community. Anjum is born as a boy called Aftab in the old city of Delhi. She's to a Shia Muslim family that claims descent from Genghis Khan. And she grows up in the walled city. And actually, to me, she's but she's one of the very unique, each of the characters is unique and not a representative of their community, So she's she. And she actually, her story she doesn't identify herself, and she's not identified in the book only as a hijra. She becomes a woman. She lives in the Khwabga, which means the house of dreams, which is a little house in the old city where many who are called hijras by the outside world live, but they're all of many genders. And actually, she gets caught up in the 2002 massacre of Muslims that took place. And she gets caught up in the massacre not because she's a hijra, but because she's a Muslim. And then she actually escapes because she's a hijra, and then moves into the graveyard. She's, the other major character in the book is a woman called Tilotma. And the book is really about, the story of these two women is really about how living in a society as orthodox as you find in India, you also have people who just stubbornly find a way to live the way they desire, So hijras traditionally actually had a place in society, sort of half in and half outside society. And India being a community and a place where it's a very feudal society still, superimposed with sort of the discourse of Western liberal rights and laws. And so you have a peculiar situation where, for example, homosexuality, it existed, it was practiced, it was sometimes openly practiced. Even, the first Mughal emperor Babur, in his memoirs, writes about it quite openly. But in the modern discourse of legality, actually, just 2 years ago, the Supreme Court criminalized homosexuality. So it was almost like a regressive thing. And yet, when it comes to the modern language of trans rights, it has recognized the other gender legally. But in the book, you have this, Anjum belongs to an older generation that doesn't speak this language. And then she actually has a small conflict with a younger one who comes in, who knows the new language of legalese and modern liberal rights. So it's also about a transition of that period, But Anjum is, like I said in the beginning, I'm not trying to do a sociology here. I'm actually telling a story, and she's one of the very important people in the book.
A determinada altura, neste livro podemos ler: Bombaim é a nossa Nova York, Delhi é a nossa Washington e Caxemira é a nossa Suíça. Bem, não será bem assim, Arundhati Roy.
Yeah, that's obviously a sarcastic remark, because there is this new very muscular nationalism. I mean, it started this modern wave that is now hitting Europe and America. And India started a little earlier. According to me, you know, in 1998, when a right-wing government came to power, and the first thing it did was to conduct the nuclear tests. And it changed the public discourse. And it was around the same time, just a few years ago, when after Soviet communism lost in the bleak mountains of Afghanistan, the war, and the world became a unipolar world, India, which had been a non-aligned country, suddenly became completely aligned in 1990, and it opened its markets to international capital. And suddenly you had this, you know, this economy which started to boom, which created a new middle class, where greed and consumerism, which had been frowned upon earlier, suddenly became something to be proud of. And it came, as many of us were warning back then, that it came at a huge price. A consuming middle class of millions was created, but at the cost of many more millions. And today that tension, the dreams of that newly created middle class have frozen in midair, and it's creating a great deal of frustration and fueling this right-wing nationalism. So, you know, that line was a part of, you know, the new hope, you know, of the new middle class, that, oh, now we are going to be, we are the new superpower, we are the new super economy, we are the new nuclear power. And the strut of that, you know, coming at the cost of today, you know, people who do not much goose step to that tune are anti-nationals, are being jailed, are being killed, and all of that.
O que também acontece neste livro, algumas páginas mais à frente, tomamos um contacto mais próximo com esta realidade. Este conflito ocupa muitas páginas deste livro, Arundhati Roy. Aliás, e de acordo também com o que acabou de dizer, podemos ler: a única coisa que impede Caxemira de se autodestruir, como o Paquistão e o Afeganistão, é o bom e velho capitalismo da pequena burguesia.
So that's, again, I mean, you know, the book has many voices in it. So the part that you just read, it's from the chapter called The Landlord, and it's spoken in the voice of an Indian intelligence officer who has sort of spent a lot of time in Kashmir. And the conflict there, I don't know how much people know about it, but Kashmir has been contested since 1947 between India and Pakistan, and the majority of the people who just want what they call azadi, which is freedom from both, and it's the most dense military occupation in the world. There are something like 500 to 700,000 soldiers there. And since 1990, when the struggle became militant, people have lived under the boot of a military occupation. And a lot of this book is set in Kashmir. And it's about how, at some point, it all turns psychotic, you know. I mean, it's not just about a narrative between oppressors and the oppressed, but what does it do? Who are those Indian soldiers there? What does it do to them? What does it do what are the negotiations that take place? How do you deal with an atmosphere that is seeded with terror, with collaborators, with informers, with torture, with deals, with both countries, India and Pakistan, playing out their horrors in the local population. So often, actually, when people somehow ask you, is this real? Is it fiction? As though fiction shouldn't be real. And I say the only way you can tell the truth about a situation like that is in fiction, because it's not just a question of human rights reports and how many people have been killed and how many people have been tortured. It's about the air. It's about people's minds and hearts and how power is negotiated on either side. And what does it do? I mean, clearly what it does to Kashmiris, but what does it do to Indians, who allow themselves to digest this kind of horror and even celebrate it? So, but it's just about human beings, It's not. I mean, the other day, someone from Poland was doing an interview with me, and he said, "You wrote the Ministry of Utmost Happiness about India, but when I read it, I read about Poland." So it's not, like I keep trying to say, it's not a guidebook or a sociology of India. It's a novel. It's a story. It's the construction of a complicated universe through which you're invited to walk.
É este o poder da boa ficção, ultrapassa fronteiras, a verdade é esta. Arundhati Roy há pouco falou de outra personagem muito importante deste livro, Tilo. Gostaria que falasse um pouco mais sobre esta mulher, que lá está, se recusa a aceitar fronteiras.
Yeah, well, Tilotama, her name is Tilotama. When I started to think about her, in my imagination, she was the child of Ammu and Velita from The God of Small Things, so the sort of younger sibling of Esteban and Rahel. And she, like many of the characters in this book, not just Anjum, but many of the characters in this book have a border running through them. So Anjum has the border of gender running through her. Tilotama has the border of caste running through her. There's another character who calls himself Saddam Hussein.
Vamos falar sobre ele.
Yeah. He converts, actually he's a Dalit coming from an untouchable caste who converts to Islam, as many have done, to escape the scourge of caste. And he has the border of religious conversion. So Tilotama is a very she's a very strange woman who somehow walks the line between sanity and something close to insanity, but not in like someone says, I don't know if it was actually insane or was it a perilous form of sanity. Because when you actually decide to keep your eyes open, and when you look at what other people don't want to see, then you do live on that border, and she does. And she's a woman who she just, like Anjum, who's a woman who becomes a woman and longs to have a child which she can't have. And Tilotama is the opposite. She is a woman who could have children but won't, and is not very maternal. And she actually follows her she has a lover who she actually leaves, but then he calls her to Kashmir for some reason, and then she begins to travel there. And she's a person she's a kind of weird archivist. and her house is just full of the most strange photographs and filings, and she's the one who starts writing the Kashmiri English dictionary that you see. But she's a remarkably strange woman.
Já percebemos que simpatiza bastante com esta personagem.
Yeah, well, I like all of them, including the wicked ones, you know. Yeah.
Já falámos aqui também em crianças e há duas bebés que são abandonadas e acolhidas neste livro. Uma delas é abandonada numa praça que, penso, Arundhati Roy, existe e é uma praça onde, no fundo, todos se vão manifestar, cada um com a sua causa, mas todos se vão manifestar. E no meio daquela confusão, uma criança negra é encontrada, uma espécie de nova salvadora, Arundhati Roy.
Well, she's the antithesis of what we've been taught in every religion will be the savior. You know, she's not a handsome white man, but a little black girl. So, but yes, that place exists, and it's a place called Jantar Mantar in Delhi. It's an old observatory, and it's an institution there because that's where all the various protest movements come through, and with their demands, and people on hunger strike. And I mean, I have spent a lot of time amongst these in various movements, and I'm familiar with them, and I know that they shelter all kinds of weirdos and nut jobs, and including me, I've spent many nights on the street there. And so, in fact, I was talking to someone yesterday, and I said that's I think when we end this, I'll read a little from that chapter. But that chapter, which isn't the first chapter in the book, but it's like, in some ways, the equivalent of, how, like War and Peace, how it begins with the great party, but this is a party on the street instead, right at the bottom of society. There are no baronesses and knights and lords, but a lot of very, very interesting people. And I was there actually one night when suddenly this baby appeared, and nobody knew what to do with it. Like all the resistance movements with all the wisdom of how to change the world, they were like, what do we do with the baby, And eventually, they called the police, and I just thought about it so much, and that was really the beginning of the idea of the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, that a little black baby appeared at the heart of all this, and the Kashmiri mothers of the disappeared didn't know what to do with the baby that had appeared, and especially not a black one, and especially not a girl, And so it's in some ways the nerve center of the book.
Neste livro também há uma espécie de cavaleiro e que se chama Saddam Hussein. Vamos explicar, Arundhati Roy, há uma razão para esta personagem ter decidido a determinada altura que se iria chamar Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, you saw him, the man on the horse in the film. So, no, the reason, of course, is there in the book. Saddam, his real name is Dayachand, and he belongs to a community of what Hindus think of as untouchables, chamars they are called, whose job is to skin cows and cattle and work in leather. And in 2002, his village is just a little bit outside of Delhi, and in 2002, when he's a very young boy, he and his father and a few other men are called to a nearby field because the upper caste Hindus, if a cow dies, they won't touch it. I mean, it's a holy cow, but when it dies, it becomes polluting and they won't touch it, and they'll call the Chamar families to pick up the carcass. And so he goes to pick up the carcass with his family, and on their way back, they are stopped at a police post. It's evening, and the police, of course, ask for a bribe. And it's usually a fixed fee, but in this case, the local policeman needs money for something or whatever, and he asks for a lot of money. And when they don't give it, he basically calls in a mob, and Saddam, as a little boy, watches his father and their friends being lynched. This is, of course, a true incident. It happens all the time. And he decides that he's going to convert to Islam, And then he moves to Delhi, and he does all kinds of jobs, and he then has a video on his phone which he watches all the time, which is a video of Saddam Hussein's hanging. I'm very impressed with Saddam's courage in the face of his execution. And Anjum, who's a Shia, says, Saddam was a bastard. He says, yeah, but I want to be that kind of bastard, I want to do what I have to do, and then I want to die like this. And he calls himself Saddam Hussein. That's this. And he's got this video that he keeps watching to get his courage up.
Penso que muitas pessoas nesta sala provavelmente ficaram um pouco surpreendidas com o que acabaram de escutar. Eu pedia à Arundhati para explicar um bocadinho melhor o que é isto das castas e como é que funciona. Para nós é uma ideia um pouco estranha, é quase uma espécie de algo que pertence apenas ao imaginário.
Well, first of all, let's say that caste is the engine that runs Indian society, modern Indian society, the most modern Indian society. Caste is if you were to come to India just before any election, all you will hear about is which caste is going to vote for whom. And it's not as simple as that there are 4 castes, and it's not like that. Actually, there are thousands of castes, and each of those, there are 4 castes, and within those there are thousands of subcastes. So, what is caste? Caste is the most cruel, most ancient social hierarchy that the human society has invented. And basically, it divides people up in a very vertical hierarchy, and it is defined by your labor. So if you're an untouchable, then this is what you'll do. You will clean the shit. You will clean if you look at the Indian government municipal sweepers, 99% of them are untouchables, or maybe 100%, Then you have the untouchable castes, like I said, leather workers, sanitary workers, barbers. There's a whole lot of professions. It's a inherited hierarchy of labor.
Só para sublinhar, é possível a mobilidade social? Ou seja, alguém passar de uma casta inferior para uma...
No, that is the whole point. You can't change. So the Brahmin is the pure, the priestly caste. Then you have the Baniyas, who are the trader caste, and you have the Shudras, who are the sort of service caste. And it sounds very strange, but actually I've written a little book called The Doctor and the Saint, which is a debate between Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar, who was, to my mind, one of the greatest intellects of modern India, who was a Dalit, an untouchable caste, and you see, even statistically today, if you look at who are all the families that run the big corporations, they are all Baniyas. If you look at who are all the accountants, they are all Baniyas. Who are all the municipal sweepers, they are all untouchables. Who are all the intellectuals, the editors? Who own the newspapers? The Baniyas. Who run the newspapers? The Brahmins. Who owns the land? The Rajputs. Who are the landless? The Dalits. So statistically too, it is something that continues to function on a minute-to-minute basis in India. You cannot marry outside your caste. Even in Delhi, you'll see people just being killed if a Dalit were to marry, every day you read in the papers about what happens. It is met with extreme violence. Less than 5% of people, even today, will marry outside their caste. Which is why I'm saying, that the anarchy is for the traffic. It's not in society as such. And one of the great falsehoods set forth in the world is the role of Gandhi in this. I can't get into it too much here, but this book, The Doctor and the Saint, it's about that, and you can't say things unless you. That book just quotes him. I don't interpret him. I just quote him from 1890s to 1948. And Gandhi said...
É muito crítica de Gandhi. A ideia que penso que a maior parte de nós tem acerca desta pessoa é que é uma espécie de herói, um pacificador. Arundhati Roy é crítica do comportamento de Gandhi.
Yeah, I think there were wonderful things about him, and yet 90% of what has been put out into the world is false. And of course, 99% of the people in the world who know anything about Gandhi know from watching Richard Attenborough's film, which was just complete nonsense, And though I don't say this lightly, so what I did was to read the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, and I quote him from the beginning of his life in South Africa to the end. Anyway, that's a long story, but I'll just tell you that the whole thing that all of us were taught in school, that Gandhi went to South Africa, he was thrown off a train, and that's how he realized that, racism was terrible, and he began to fight against racism in South Africa. This is just rubbish. First of all, living in India, you don't have to go all the way to South Africa to understand what racism is. But when Gandhi went to South Africa, the first battle that he won, the first battle that he fought and won, was to get a third entrance opened to the Durban post office, because he said Indians and blacks should not share the same entrance. And from then to the time he left, he referred to Africans as kafirs, as savages. He had no time for the indentured labor in India who belonged to the lower caste. He said, we Indians, upper caste Indians are Aryans. That was the language, And even in jail, campaigned for separate food, separate prisons from Africans for Indians. So, and then brought those prejudices back to India. He said caste is the genius of Indian civilization. Yes, what he did was, he said caste and hereditary professions are important, but we should treat everybody well, So, meaning the Dalits should clean the shit, the Brahmins should be the priests, but everybody should be treated equally, which is impossible to do, And the idea of entitlement, the idea of self-representation, the idea of the redistribution of wealth, these were things he did not believe in, But of course, that's another...
E é por causa de opiniões como esta que Arundhati Roy tem recebido ameaças, teve processos na justiça, mas continua a viver em Delhi, Arundhati Roy. Como é que foi passar no fundo, de heroína nacional, às vezes, não sei se esta palavra é um bocadinho excessiva, a quase traidora?
See, the thing is that it's not that simple, because who are the people who decide who are the heroes and who are the traitors? The people who own the microphone, But that's not the way ordinary people think. So for me, my experience as a person who writes novels, who writes essays, who travels, who goes into the heart of the country, it's very important for, let's say, people, television anchors and the media who are completely compromised in their ownership and in what they're saying, to create this myth about, she's a villain, she's an anti-national. But there isn't any other writer who, in India, surely, who goes to the Punjab and can be speaking to 3,000 farmers, or goes to the areas where the dams are, drowning out whole civilizations, or gets invited to walk with the gorillas in the forest. Because people in India, one of the greatest things about India is the wisdom of the resistance movements, and the understanding. So all the time I'm invited to portray myself as this lone crusader, this brave woman who stands up, but if I was alone, there would be something wrong with my politics. I write from the heart of a crowd, and I'm not, there are many people who disagree with this narrative that's been put out, who are standing up against it. The poorest people in the world have stopped some of the richest corporations in their tracks, So I'm on this side of the line, and I am in a huge circle of solidarity with many people.
Mas não tem medo, porque isto de receber ameaças à nossa vida, à nossa integridade física, bem, eu ficaria com medo. Não tem medo?
Look, it's stupid not to be afraid, Like, people keep calling me fearless. I'm not fearless. I'm pretty fearful and careful, and try to be tactical, try to be strategic, And yet, nothing frightens me more than being a writer who doesn't say what she thinks, because that is a prison from which I'll never escape,
Nunca pensou deixar a Índia? Nestes anos todos, depois das ameaças que tem recebido, nunca houve um dia em que pensou, vou fazer as malas e vou mudar-me para outro país?
Well, I've never thought of that, and I hope I won't. It sounds very odd, because it's not because I'm some patriot and I think it's the best place in the world. It's not that. It's just that I am like a tree. My tap roots go down, and it's the place I know as a writer, and it's the place I can read, So it's not because I feel some great patriotic sense of like, oh, there's no place like this, not like that. And in fact, the most patriotic Indians are the ones who don't live there. Actually, the ones who are always advising the government to bomb Pakistan, and their dress is, Champagne Urbana or something. So it's not for that reason. But surely, yeah, I mean, last year, when I was, just months away from finishing writing the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, there was a terrifying period in April and May, February, March, where there were student protests in all the universities across the country about a number of issues. And what the ruling party and its cohorts did was it filmed these students, and then it superimposed a different soundtrack onto that film, and then it was broadcast from mainstream TV studios, and people started saying, oh, these campuses are anti-national, they should be shut down, and so on. And students were arrested. There were these vigilantes out on the streets, as you know, I mean, the same ones who are beating and lynching people on the streets now. And then some of these TV anchors started to say, oh, fine, these are students, but who's the mind behind it? Is this woman, and why is she free, more or less, implying that. And it was, I mean, that was the one time when I really got frightened, because I wanted to protect the book. Like, I wanted to finish the book. I'd been working on it for 10 years, and I just thought, oh God, I have to finish this before anything happens. So I did pick up my bags and leave, but only for about 10 days, and then I realized that I can't even write if I start to run, so I went back, and I just, it was all right. I mean, it comes in waves, this kind of danger, but their hatred is so spread around that my chance comes only once in a while,
Como é que se lida com estas ameaças, com este ódio? Como é que se lida com isto, Arundhati Roy? Como é que se prossegue com a nossa vida?
See, the thing is, again, if you look at the threats and the hatred and this right wing, the first thing it does with women, any women, not just me, any woman who it doesn't like, you should be gang raped, you should be killed, that kind of thing. But, firstly, it's not as bad as, it's not that I live every day in fear. When I go out, I don't get threatened. When I'm walking on the streets, there is a great embrace, I'm not looking over my shoulder all the time. Surely there are moments when you do feel unsafe, but they haven't won the war. The battle is on there, on the streets, and it's not just me. I just keep saying, not just me, But the other thing is that I would feel so terrified if they loved me. Like, I'm just like, imagine if they started complimenting me, what would I do? So it's fine. When you're a person who is in the conflict, when you have opinions, when you're not trying to just live between bestseller lists and literature festivals, when you're in there, you have to expect a certain amount of flack, I don't expect that I won't get into trouble, It's all part of what one does, And many of us are in trouble, and then the trouble is so peculiar. The last 2 times, it was just ridiculous. One was because I wrote an essay called Professor POW about a man, a professor of literature who's 90% disabled, who's in a wheelchair, who was thrown into prison, called a terrorist, a Maoist. And I just said, listen, you've got to give him bail, And for that, I was charged with criminal contempt of court and made to appear for 2 years, dragged around, And then just before this book came out, there was a piece of what we now know as fake news that appeared on a Pakistani website saying that Arundhati Roy was in Kashmir and she said something, whatever, about the Indian army. And then all the Indian right-wing websites and then the big newspapers picked it up. And then a member of parliament said that, she should be tied to an army jeep and used as a human shield in Kashmir. Then the TV crews land up outside your door. Then the TV studios have discussions saying, should she be used as a human shield? So you're just like, oh.
Com jornalistas à sua porta a perguntar o que é que achava disto ou não?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they wanted to ask. I didn't open the door, because... when they come at you, that's the new thing, these TV cameras, they just come and they start provoking you. And what are you supposed to say? Do you think you should be used as a human shield? So you have to know to just look at them and say, I like your body, or something like that. Because otherwise, it just becomes ridiculous,
A vigilância. Já agora aproveito para dizer, vão pensando em questões, daqui a pouco abriremos esta conversa ao público aqui presente, mas a vigilância que os Estados hoje em dia exercem sobre o seu povo e não só, é uma das suas preocupações. Em 2015 foi a Moscovo, foi ter com Edward Snowden. Curiosamente, uma das primeiras perguntas que Snowden terá feito a Arundhati Roy é: vem radicalizar-me? Portanto, cuidado, podemos estar na presença de uma perigosa... como é que foi esse encontro com o Edward Snowden e porquê é que decidiu ir a Moscou e conversar com ele? Sabemos que foi um convite de John, uma iniciativa do ator norte-americano John Cusack, mas porquê é que decidiu que era importante conversar com Snowden?
Well, I mean, I was very interested in the whole, obviously in the whole question of surveillance, because in India today, right now, in fact, as we speak, the government is trying to put in what is called the UID, the unique identity number, where all the information of all citizens is going to be digitally on this card, so you get pulled up at a traffic light.
Em Portugal. Nós já temos algo parecido em Portugal.
Sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, all of us have our friendly cell phones that are watching us all the time, and so how are people so willing to be disempowered is a question, and to meet Edward Snowden was interesting because it's like meeting somebody who had such a sophisticated understanding of technology and how it works and how invasive it can be in your life. And yet, I was there with John Cusack and Daniel Ellsberg, who's 84 years old, and he was the Snowden of the 70s. He was the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers, And So Snowden and Ed and Daniel Ellsberg and Snowden were, exchanging notes about being in the CIA, and I want to ask them, but what was it? I mean, how could you have joined in the first place? Wasn't it enough? Like Hiroshima, Korea, Vietnam, Iran, South America. I mean, what were you expecting? Some sort of a moral war or a moral state? Why were you so disillusioned? And so it was a very, very interesting conversation, because there was obviously a very sophisticated technical mind, but in terms of obviously, he was young, and I think learning and reading about things that he hadn't before he joined the CIA,
Assustou-a aquilo que a tecnologia é capaz de fazer?
Sorry. Yeah, but I, having traveled to Kashmir, one knew that you're under constant surveillance, and especially through the cell phone. So people in India who are part of resistance movements, and all of us know that we are being watched all the time. But now the difference is that they want to put in a formal surveillance system in the name, of course, of social inclusion and all that, but a formal surveillance system where it'll be impossible for someone to make a train journey without the government knowing about it. Every single transaction, every single journey, every single ATM, and of course it's all done in the name of the poor, but the poor in India called upon to give their fingerprints. The farmers don't even have fingerprints sometimes. Their fingers have been smoothened, and they're just like, oh, the guy at the back says, I'll give mine. And the identity theft, and the fact that like I was talking to someone who said just in one state how millions of people have fallen out of the pension, out of the ration scheme, because you go there and say, oh, the internet is not working, or some old person is told it'll only work if you climb up that mountain. And, people don't know how to operate bank accounts, and people haven't been educated, people haven't got water, haven't got homes, haven't got toilets, but they are supposed to know how to work the internet,
Dito isto, tem algum cuidado especial com o seu computador, com o seu telemóvel?
Well, I do, in the sense that if I, for example, I went into the forest of central India where there's a guerrilla war being fought. I went in to walk with the comrades for many weeks. And I left my cell phone on in Delhi and went, so that because everybody's tracked on their cell phones, So you have to know. When I go to Kashmir, it's just like constantly, the intelligence knows where you are, what you're doing, and sometimes they just call you, and then are you, or they don't call me, but they call other people and say, is she there for trouble or just privately, and then you say, what's the difference?
Já agora, radicalizou Snowden, Arundhati Roy?
Sorry, what? God knows, I haven't met him since then,
Porquê é que ele lhe terá feito esta pergunta? Está aqui para me radicalizar?
Well, I was surprised that he even knew me, actually. But he told me that when he escaped from Hong Kong and went to Moscow, and he was traveling with a woman called Sarah Harrison who was with WikiLeaks. And she was the person who was with him in the 40 days that he was stuck in the Moscow airport. And, every day he had to speak to the press and stuff. And so he said that she used to tell him, can't you just read something before you talk to the press? And, she was asking him to read some of my work. And so I think that's how he came to know me. So.
Eu sei que não gosta de aconselhar ou de incentivar as pessoas a visitarem ou a não visitarem a Índia. A nós, aqui, pelo menos a Portugal, chegam-nos histórias de cães azuis por causa da poluição, de um guru que é preso por múltiplas violações, mas que depois tem muitos acólitos, muitos adeptos a manifestarem-se em prol da liberdade dele. Chegam-nos este tipo de notícias de violações de mulheres, da morte de mulheres vítimas de violência. Bem, porque é que devemos visitar a Índia apesar disto tudo, Arundhati Roy?
You don't have to. But see, the thing is that what news comes out of a place is not accidental, right? So there's a time when, a few years ago, when the only news was good news. Here's this great new economy, here's this wonderful finance destination.
Investimento na energia solar, na energia limpa, com a construção de vários parques, não é?
So the thing is, everything is a public relations exercise for somebody or the other. And so at a time when there was actually a civil war in India against indigenous people because they were being driven off their lands for mining companies and so on. India had to be portrayed as this wonderful finance destination. The minute the economy is not that friendly, then the bad news starts to come. The fact is that at any given point of time, there's bad news, there's good news, there's complicated news, like in any other place, But what is the trending story depends a lot on what advantage it has to whom. So when you live in a place, sometimes the news about it that goes out, you read it and say, oh, it's really about where I live, because I hadn't heard about this, And of course, though the last thing you mentioned was very interesting, because it's really very puzzling, that this guru called Ram Rahim in Punjab and Haryana, who has millions of followers, and he was recently convicted of rape. And his followers, which included women, came out, and the army had to be called out because they were burning and torching things, and 32 people were killed. And of course, if you look at him and you look at his, he was he used to make films about himself, and I was looking at some of those trailers the other day. It's a good entertainment. You smoke a joint and watch those trailers. But he had the credits, the credits of the film: producer, line producer, screenplay writer, focus puller, cameraman, set designer, hero, spot boy. Like there were about 45 credits, and they were all him, And yet, actually, it's easy to laugh, and then you really start to think, but there's something we don't understand here, I mean, there are not surely 1 million people are going to come and burn vehicles if something happened to me. And so this, you do need to try and understand what is it that is happening in the world, And of course, my reaction when I watched all that was to feel greatly relieved and greatly irrelevant, because I thought, okay, like, don't get too serious about yourself, because this is what's, important to people, that guy, not you. But I think everything has, I don't know what the answer to it is, and I'm curious, and I will think about it a lot, because I've learned not to just react at first base and leave it. But honestly, things that are happening in the world are so psychotic, that you feel, it's almost like, sometimes I feel, especially when I watch most of the television channels in India, I think of that old movie, The Exorcist, and like this green bile is coming out of the screens, and you're like, just the hatred, the nationalism, the lies, and you're just wondering what has happened, and maybe what we need are shamans and witch doctors or something to heal us.
Já agora pergunto, e quando ouve Trump, será que pensa a mesma coisa?
When I listen to Trump, see, the thing with Trump is that people often equate Trump and Modi. And there's a big difference between Trump and Modi. And the difference to me is this, that Trump is the product of the toxic effluent of a failed system. He's the product of the failure of the Republicans and the failure of the Democrats, and a system that's going down. So he's an outsider, and the institutions that run America, the media, the courts, the army, all of them are nervous of him because he's a crazy man, you don't know what he's going to say or tweet. Modi is the opposite. He's the system. He belongs to an organization called the RSS, which was set up in the 1920s, many of whose members openly admire the Nazis, openly talk about how the Muslims of India are like the Jews of Germany. Nowadays, you can read in the papers of them wanting to sort of having formulas of how to start a new race of Indians. And all the institutions have fallen in line. Not all, but, they are being peopled, like chessmen put in place. University teachers are being fired, replaced by these people who talk this nonsense about how Hinduism really discovered plastic surgery and discovered the nuclear bomb and is the heart of everything. And so we are actually facing, in the next few years, I think, a very serious and unpredictable problem, because the mobs have been unleashed on the streets. There's a kind of violence in the air which we haven't seen in a long, long time, and every day you're hearing stories about people being lynched because they are transporting cows, Muslims being lynched because they're rumored to be eating beef. And every time someone is lynched, it pushes a community deeper into a ghetto. In the countryside, they are scared to go to shops or to buy seeds, or, you're pushing people, you're creating this polarization. What in India call vote banks. You create a polarization and then you mop up the majority vote. So it's a terrifying situation.
Uma última pergunta. Os livros podem ajudar a combater isto?
I think everything can help, not just books, but everybody has to do what they can do. And I do think that I mean, obviously, books can also do the opposite, which, supporting and spreading this kind of hatred. So books are not one thing. I mean, it depends on the book. But writers are just like plumbers or air conditioning mechanics also. They can go and fix the faucet of the fascists if they, so... historically, we have seen intellectuals do that, but I think to be able to deepen the understanding of why something is happening, not just describe it, but understand it. What could be more important,
Perguntas?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I bought your book, and I'm sad that I can't speak with you about your book at the moment. I will read it, and I hope to see you again to speak about the book. So, as I am here, I read that you live in New Delhi. I was there some years ago. Well, your country, there are no adjectives to characterize it. It's fantastic, incredible. But my question is the following, that has to do with the religion and your way of life. Now the question, still the elephants cross the street. I have seen it.
The elephants cross the street, the elephants bend the crockery. Last year I saw a sweet photograph in the place where I come from, Kerala, where all the traffic had stopped on the road because an elephant baby had been born and the road was really steep and the mother had stopped the traffic to prevent her baby from rolling down the hill. So that is beautiful.
Sim?
Espero estar a ser audível. Eu vou começar, de facto, ao fim e ao cabo, ao contrário do sistema que eu tinha pensado. Quando falamos na cultura e falamos nos livros, não podemos esquecer que a Alemanha nazi, na Segunda Guerra Mundial, era seguramente o país mais culto do mundo. Não sei se, de facto, os livros terão salvação. Agora, entrando nas questões, aliás, ainda que estivemos a falar, é a maior democracia do mundo, sem sombra de dúvida, pelo menos em dimensões, ou pelo menos no acesso temporal ao poder. Obviamente que é um mosaico de culturas, religiões, de povos, obviamente com sistemas, como aliás focou bastante, com contradições profundas. No entanto, de facto, esta incrível Índia publicitária, de facto, digamos, a par e aí gostaria, é a questão, aliás, que queria colocar, basicamente, como tem acontecido, aliás, aconteceu no mundo árabe, a Índia, é que é um aspecto muito importante, a Índia tem, de facto, digamos, um traumatismo que deriva de 47-48, quando foi separada do Paquistão e posteriormente também do Bangladesh. E, portanto, a situação não é por acaso que a Índia é hoje a quinta potência nuclear em termos de armamento, mas seguramente se pensarmos o Paquistão, o seu vizinho Paquistão e digamos, os seus vizinhos são basicamente a sétima potência nuclear. Agora, basicamente, a questão é que falou precisamente de uma classe média que se vai formando. Aliás, a Índia tem uma fuga de cérebros, nomeadamente nas áreas das matemáticas, nas áreas das informáticas, que será seguramente, digamos, digamos, uma nova classe com mais competências, que seguramente querá estar, digamos, ter acesso ao poder. Isso não fará com que a Índia, de facto, modifique a necessidade, de facto, de novas dinâmicas sociais, com pessoas, de facto, com competências diferentes. E também há aqui uma mudança, de facto, no mercado livre. Há uma posição diferente com o fim do socialismo, nomeadamente, de apoio, nomeadamente, do RS. Eu penso que aqui, de facto, esta questão desta nova dinâmica, desta nova classe mais bem formada, não será ela possível. Vou concluir.
Precisamos que passe às perguntas, exato.
E a conclusão é qual é que acha o papel desta nova classe média mais bem formada? Qual o papel que poderá vir a ter?
They can write books, but no, I think it's there was in India's not a country that that was some uncivilized place which was then colonized and created like other colonies. It was a place. Firstly, there wasn't any such thing as India. That is one myth we should know about. The borders that are today India and Pakistan and Bangladesh were drawn by the British Empire. And a new middle class isn't going to help very much unless it understands the things we've been talking about. Now, what is development, what is progress, and what can we do? I mean, the Ministry of Utmost Happiness is set in a graveyard, but sometimes I think that all of us, if we understand what climate change is about, are living in a graveyard, and we should understand what to do about that, whether we are middle class or not. The middle class sometimes is the worst offender, who believes that coming into the middle class is progress, and therefore this system of destruction should be known as development, but it's not. So we need to radically rethink things.
Uma última pergunta, já agora aproveito para pedir às pessoas para não se irem embora, porque ainda vamos ter mais uma leitura. Por favor, a pergunta.
I'm taking advantage of the fact that I have stolen the microphone, apparently. So I would like to get back to your book, which I, by the way, finished reading today. I just wanted to ask you if you could give us an indication of your thought processes of how you went from a transgender person to the conflict in Kashmir.
See, the thing is that I think we must look at the transgender person as a person. She was one of the characters in the book, like the other characters, and it's a book that, as I said, deals with borders, and it's about the air we breathe. It's not about a single subject. It's about caste, it's about gender, it's about occupation, but it's about human beings who live together and create a story. So we shouldn't separate a transgender person from other persons. It's a book about characters and a story, and how to me, the narrative itself is like a city. It starts off in an old city, and then it begins to unspool outwards and outwards and outwards, and a universe of streets and blind alleys and people that you don't walk past. So it's not, I think one of the things that happens with fiction increasingly is a kind of domestication, where you're supposed to write under subject headings. Is it about caste? Is it about gender? Is it about Kashmir? Is it about India? Is it about poverty? Whereas actually the air we breathe is about all of this.
Vamos à leitura, Arundhati Roy, para terminarmos esta conversa, à leitura.
Yes, okay. I'll just read you a little bit and then So this is chapter 3, and it's called The Nativity. It was peacetime, or so they said. All morning, a hot wind had whipped through the city streets, driving sheets of grit, soda bottle caps, and beady stubs before it, smacking them into car windscreens and cyclists' eyes. When the wind died, the sun, already high in the sky, burned through the haze, and once again the heat rose and shimmered on the streets like a belly dancer. People waited for the thunder shower that always followed a dust storm, but it never came. Fire raged through a swathe of huts huddled together on the river bank, gutting more than 2,000 in an instant. Still the amalthas bloomed, a brilliant, defiant yellow. Each blazing summer it reached up and whispered to the hot brown sky, "Fuck you." She appeared quite suddenly a little after midnight. No angels sang, no wise men brought gifts, but 1,000,000 stars rose in the east to herald her arrival. One moment she wasn't there, and the next, there she was on the concrete pavement in a crib of litter, silver cigarette foil, a few plastic bags, and empty packets of Uncle Chips. She lay in a pool of light under a column of swarming, neon-lit mosquitoes, naked. Her skin was blue-black, sleek as a baby seal's. She was wide awake but perfectly quiet, unusual for someone so tiny. Perhaps in those first short months of her life, she had already learned that tears, her tears at least, were futile. A thin white horse tethered to the railing, a small dog with mange, a concrete-colored garden lizard, 2 palm-striped squirrels who should have been asleep, and from her hidden perch, a she-spider with a swollen egg sac watched over her. Other than that, she seemed to be utterly alone. Around her, the city sprawled for miles. 1,000-year-old sorceress, dozing but not asleep even at this hour. Grey flyovers snaked out of her Medusa skull, tangling and untangling under the yellow sodium haze. Sleeping bodies of homeless people lined their high, narrow pavements, head to toe, head to toe, head to toe, looping into the distance. Old secrets were folded into the furrows of her loose parchment skin. Each skin was a street. Each wrinkle was a street, each street a carnival, each arthritic joint a crumbling amphitheater where stories of love and madness, stupidity, delight, and unspeakable cruelty had been played out for centuries. But this was to be the dawn of her resurrection. Her new masters wanted to hide her knobby varicose veins under imported fishnet stockings, cram her withered tits into saucy padded bras, and jam her aching feet into pointed high-heeled shoes. They wanted her to swing her stiff old hips and reroute the edges of her grimace upwards into a frozen, empty smile. It was the summer grandma became a whore.
Arundhati Roy, autora de O Deus das Pequenas Coisas e também de O Ministério da Felicidade Suprema. E agora os editores não nos vão ouvir, e se quiserem ler alguns dos ensaios da Arundhati Roy que não estão disponíveis em Portugal, alguns estão disponíveis na internet. Obrigada a todos.